The 2015 Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction is an international guideline on disaster risk reduction. It incorporates a wealth of knowledge from Japan's disaster experiences. One of the pillars is the disaster risk reduction approaches implemented by statesmen. One example is the Tone River diversion works to protect the capital Edo from flood damage. It started in the 17th century and took 60 years. Motivated by disasters, the government implemented various initiatives to transform Edo into a disaster-resilient society. In modern times, the disaster risk reduction initiatives have been carried out by preparing legislation and policies. After the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, earthquake-resistant structure calculations were included in building standards. The Ise-wan typhoon led to enactment of the Basic Act on Disaster Control Measures in 1961. It vested responsibility for disaster risk reduction in the national and local governments. In the 1995 Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake, the collapse of buildings was a particularly significant problem. In response, the Act for Promotion of the Seismic Retrofitting of Buildings was enacted to promote retrofitting of old buildings. And the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake, which caused unparalleled damage, triggered major revisions to the guidelines for tsunami countermeasures. In such ways, Japan has leveraged the lessons learned from each disaster, and the government has led the improvement of disaster countermeasures. In order to contribute to global disaster risk reduction activities, Japan has been the host nation to all 3 past UN World Conferences on disaster risk reduction. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, adopted at the 3rd conference, featured a greater emphasis on development issues. The goal of the Sendai Framework is to prevent new and reduce existing disaster risk. 7 global targets were agreed upon to achieve the goal. Countries have commenced measures towards achievement of the goal according to the benchmark set in 2017. 4 specific priorities for action have been set for countries to keep in mind to achieve global targets. They include various proposals from Japan. One is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience to invest in advance to reduce the risks of any future disasters, thereby containing economic damage and preventing, as much as possible, post-disaster delays in social and economic growth. Another proposal is the principle of Build Back Better. That is, to turn disasters into an advantage for creating a stronger society through the reconstruction and recovery process. It is also important to enhance the capabilities of national disaster risk reduction organizations. It is essential to prepare legislation and long-term plans through strong organizational leadership and appropriate budgetary provisions. Even before the Sendai Framework was formulated, Japan had been undertaking disaster risk reduction projects in cooperation with various countries in line with guideline principles. The Indian Ocean earthquake motivated the Sri Lankan government to strengthen disaster control measures. Japan assisted the creation of a disaster risk reduction roadmap.
まずは危険は何かを知って、でそれを所要の少ない国家予算をうまくちゃんと正しく割り振ってそれを実行していくと。
In Thailand, Japan provided a wide range of advice to include a disaster risk reduction perspective in the 2004 opening of the Blue Line Metro, a major form of transportation in Bangkok, a flood-prone area. A flood-resilient subway was born as a result. In the Philippines, Japan supported the development of a reconstruction plan based on the principle of Build Back Better for the massive damage caused by Typhoon Haiyan.
災害リスクを理解して、それを次の災害が起こる前に計画に反映させる。それが 最も大きな経済なんですか、費用対効果をもたらす、活動であると。
JICA will continue to support these countries toward steady implementation of the Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction.